This was about as bizarre and as easy as it gets.
So the number for me was a number that would allow me to never have to work again.
I feel like we got top.
I went from a sale of, $500,000 to in debt.
$192 million.
This is Built to Sell Radio with your host, John Warlow.
Fortunes are made or lost, not by what happens to us, but by how we react. Bad things happen to good businesses. Now it's up to you how you want to respond. A lot of owners right now are cutting expenses to the bone, just trying to survive. Some are being paralyzed with fear. A rare few are taking the opportunity to reevaluate their business. Now that the shock has settled in and we are now in the process of restarting, it's really a unique opportunity to rethink what it is you want to create, how valuable a company you have, how much it runs without you, and what you might do now, maybe given a little bit of extra time to structure it so that it can be something that lives without you and ultimately is a sellable asset. It's exactly what we do at Value Builder. You can check out some resources at valuebuilder.com. There you'll get a questionnaire which will allow you to look at your business through the lens of an acquirer. We can also connect you directly with a certified value builder, a trained expert in the value of companies, and someone who can be your sounding board as you think about rebuilding. It's all available at valuebuilder.com. Here at Built to Sell Radio, we're all about trying to maximize the value of your company. We're trying to give you the tips and tricks to outmaneuver, out-negotiate the acquirer and make sure you come out on top. And every once in a while, I get put in my place and humbled a little bit by someone who has an alternative view. Someone who says, you know what, like squeezing every last dime out of an acquirer is not necessarily what I'm into. In fact, what I want is a fair price for my business, and I want to move on. And that's exactly what my next guest, David Amigo, discovered. He decided he didn't want to necessarily fight with an acquirer. He actually wanted to forge a relationship with a buyer, and he enjoys that relationship to this day. Here to tell you how he did it is David Amigo. Dave Amigo, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about Carolina Country Homes. So I took a look at your website, and it looks like they're modular homes that you can buy and kind of put on a plot of land. Describe them for me.
Yes. So they're factory-built homes. We actually started in October of '98 with mobile homes, okay, and we graduated to modular homes.
What's the difference?
Mobile homes are built to the federal HUD standards. Modular homes are typically built to your state code, which is typically here in North and South Carolina, the International Residential Building Code.
So when I see those trucks with like driving down the highway with a house on top, is that a modular home?
Could be. Could be a mobile as well. It could be either or.
And who buys a modular home? What's the demographic?
It's really varied over the years. It used to be that it was somebody who was looking for a less expensive home, but that's really changed. There's a certain demographic that's paying cash. It's a lot of times a second home. It's somebody who understands the quality that goes into a modular home. If you think about it, right, you see these homes going down the road at 70, 80, sometimes 90 miles an hour. They got to be picked up by a crane, put on the foundation. They are well built. I mean, they are really, they're built to take some punishment. And so there's a certain demographic that's
what
really—
would a modular home cost? Like a two bedroom, 1,500 square foot home? Like, give me a ballpark.
Well, here's the challenge. I've been out of the business since 2015.
Okay.
And so that's quite a lot of time with a lot of real estate appreciation.
Sure.
But I would tell you that the average home when I left the business, 2,000 square feet, ranch style, 2 boxes, so it was 2 pieces put together, was probably about $170,000.
Got
Now,
it.
that didn't include the property, probably didn't include some improvements such as well or septic. So that's just kind of a ballpark.
And what was your business model? Were you selling directly to consumers or through construction guys or what gals? What was
Definitely direct through consumers. So I like to tell the story that the modular home industry has two parents. Okay. One parent was brought up and was from the Northeast of the United States. The other parent was brought up in basically the South. Okay. So what has happened is for the father, right, who was brought up in the North, he was a typical stick-built home builder. Okay. So he would basically build homes, stick-built, but the weather got bad. So he decided it's better off to go inside the factory and I can build every day in a weather-controlled environment. Okay, that's dad. Mom actually comes from the automotive industry. Mom started out with, cars, and that turned into RVs, and RVs turned into mobile homes, and mobile homes turned into modular homes. So the distribution really follows the genealogy, right? So in the Northeast, a lot of modular home builders were really stick builders that realized there's a better way. I got problems with labor.
I've never heard that term, stick builders.
Yeah, stick builders are somebody who just goes out on a lot. It's traditional home building.
Home building, okay.
Right. So they go out on a lot with a bunch of sticks, and they bring their crews and they just start constructing the house on site. But in the South, specifically the Southeast, what you found was a business model that was like an automobile dealership. So when I first started in 98, 99, we had a retail lot, right? Like a car lot where I had, 5 to 7 models, and you would come tour my lot and you would pick out the model you wanted. Now, we wouldn't necessarily sell you the one that was sitting on the lot. We would order one for you with your colors. Once in a while, we would sell those lot models. Very different than the automotive industry where they want to get rid of their models, right? A 2019 car is really depreciating in value in 2020. So you want to get rid of that model.
Okay.
And home building is different.
You said something I wanted to just clarify, David. So when you say it's similar to the car dealership, were you buying the inventory from a modular home manufacturer? In essence, you were a dealer of these.
That's correct.
Got it. And how many manufacturers did you get supply from? Just one, or were there a variety?
It evolved over time. We started with one, we moved to another one, and we were still a one manufacturer dealership. And you would think, and this is one of the big mistakes I made in the industry, you would think the loyalty would really help you. It's actually exactly opposite. You had to have multiple manufacturers to do better for yourself. So by the time I left, I had 3.
Meaning you got better terms, better deals, better margins when...
Yeah. You would think if you were somebody's number one client that they would treat you like gold. And actually it was exactly opposite. It was when you did less business with them, but they realized how much business you could do that they would treat you better.
What would you make off of a $170,000 home? Like, what's the margin here? Because you have to buy it from someone. And then
great question. Margins are irrelevant in this business. You make a certain dollar amount per house. So typically, at the end with modular homes, they're going to try to make $20,000 to $30,000 per house. And I say margins are irrelevant. I'm going to give you 2 examples. Okay. I have 2 clients that come to me, right? First client comes to me and says, I have my property. I want to build this $100,000 home. I'm going to make $20,000 on it. I say, great, it's 20% margin. We'd all look at that and go, wow, that's fabulous. Great margins, way to go, right? Second person comes to me and says, I want to buy the same exact home for $100,000. I don't have any property, so I would like to buy this $50,000 piece of property to put the home on. Well, we would arrange for that to happen. I'd make the same $20,000, but I'd have to lay out the extra 50. So now your margin is 20 over 150, which is significantly less, right? And so we would say that deal is not worth as much, but the way the business works is you have a fixed cost, and it's just about how many deals you can close in the month. And it doesn't really take any longer, or your interest cost, because interest rates are so low, the interest carry on that extra $50,000 is insignificant.
Got it. So you've got, you sort of make 20, 30 grand on a sale ish.
Yes.
And that's okay. Got it. And how did you differentiate the business? I'm assuming there are other dealers of modular homes in the Carolinas, the Southeast. What made you guys unique?
Yeah, that great question. And this was really our secret sauce. So as I was mentioning to you, the business model was very much like the car dealership model. Okay. And so you had a dealership like mine in every single town, maybe multiple dealerships in every single town across North and South Carolina. Everybody remembers the home recession of 07, 08, 09.
Sure.
What most people don't know is there was another housing recession prior to that in mobile homes, manufactured homes. And so I like to tell people I got into the business as the snow skier who's going downhill, and there's an avalanche coming. Okay. And we're just barely staying ahead of the avalanche. Every so often we're getting pelted with a snowball in the back of the head. Okay. So when I got into the business in 98, I believe there was over 600 dealerships in the state of South Carolina. And I'll never forget this. And there's a long story of why that all happened. And it happens to do with financing of the homes. Mobile homes used to be financed just like cars, right? So they were chattel loans. And there was a company, Green Tree Financial, who employed an accounting gimmick called gain on sale accounting. And so what would happen is if you signed the contract, and let's say back in those days, it was probably somewhere between 10 and 20 years to buy the home, right? They were financing the home itself, just like you would finance a car, except the car is typically, 2 to 5 years, right? They would sit down and calculate the dollar amount that they were going to make over the course of 20 years, and they would book it in the quarter or the month that it was sold, right? And so what was happening is they loosened credit. This is pre-Great Recession days, right?
This is before 08 or not. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So here's what's going on, right? Everybody's paid on bonuses. Everybody at the bank's paid on bonuses. Okay. And the joke is, like, if you have a pulse, you get a loan. And even some people who don't have pulses get loans, right?
Right.
And it's this really a terrible scam that was happening before I got into the business. So what happened was they were going to dealerships like me, and they were giving all this financing, and everybody I can talk to got a loan. And so the manufacturer was getting backed up. So the manufacturer put pressure on the dealership, said, you got to open a second lot, okay? And we're going to give you this much inventory. And if you don't like it, we're cutting you off because we're 20 weeks, backdated in our production. Mm-hmm. And so guess what? You're getting, 30 houses. 10 of them are going to have green carpet. 10 of them are going to have blue carpet, and 10 of them are going to have tan carpet. And you don't make any changes, and you go rent that lot and you store them there. And so the cycle went on for quite a bit, right? Because Green Tree Financial, they're showing these incredible results to Wall Street, right? Look at all this money we're making. Well, guess what? When you don't do your diligence on credit, eventually certain folks don't pay their bills because they were never qualified to pay their bills. And then the cycle reversed. And I got in, unfortunately, I didn't know this. I just learned this, as I went along. I got in as the cycle was coming crashing down. And that's why I use the analogy of the snow skiing. Right?
So go back to the point, though, that your secret sauce, what made you guys unique?
So what happened was we came in, I started the business with a partner. It was not my idea. He was a mortgage broker, and he did loans, but he did real estate loans for mobile home. So they were tied with the land. And in the business, they call those land home packages. And so the financing was different. So we had two things that came across. People told us we could never survive doing land home packages because it cost too much money and the financing took too long, right? Versus somebody would come in, literally, you'd come into a dealership and you'd leave with a house. You'd leave with paperwork that says you own a house and a big loan, right? Mm-hmm. And so we didn't do chattel loans. I think in the history of my company, I might have done 3 chattel
Forgive
loans.
me, I don't know what a chattel loan is. I just don't. That's not
a chattel loan is basically a loan on real property such as a car, right? A car loan is a chattel loan.
Okay, there's an asset that underlines the...
Yeah, a depreciating asset.
A depreciating asset. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're losing me a little bit on what made you guys special. So there are all these kind of giving away free money financiers who are pushing all this stuff. And then you guys were doing it differently.
Yeah, we come in, we're doing land home financing. And what happens is the industry starts imploding. Okay. So typically you had mostly mom and pop dealerships, folks that probably weren't very well capitalized. And all of a sudden their bank financing's cut off. They have all this extra inventory. They can't make their payments. And now their clients can't get loans because the whole cycle reversed. So we come in there, we're doing very specific land home financing, and we embrace technology. We were really big on getting our website up. And so think about this, right? This is the early 2000s, right? And in a car dealership model, right, it used to be when you went to go buy a car, you would look at your local dealership, maybe within 30 miles. Well, we had an attitude because we were doing modular homes and the overwhelming majority of the home is built in the factory. I'll go anywhere in North and South Carolina. I don't care if it's at the coast, in the mountains, we just didn't care. And so the internet starts becoming popular, right? In the early 2000s, we're advertising, your local dealership is going away. So, and people start searching the web before they go shopping. Well, who do they find? They find us. And it made us probably one of the top 2 dealerships in all of North and South Carolina.
How big did you get this company before you decided you wanted to sell it?
It's funny. Even though we were big, we kind of we got to a point and plateaued very quickly. We were about a $10 million company. And I never set up a second location. I really, we became a destination spot. And that's one of the marketing tools, right? So the business model called for us to have this local, place, retail business where you would attract local people. Well, we really converted that into a destination shop. We worked in a very small town called Lancaster, South Carolina. And there's really not much in Lancaster, South Carolina that would attract folks to come 2-3 hours. But every weekend we'd have a minimum of 5 different parties. To this day, it still happens that travel over 2 hours to come visit our dealer.
How did you guys make it a destination?
It was our use of technology. It was being on the web.
So they weren't getting anything special in the way of an experience. It was just that you were owning the internet and they were searching and they're like, oh, we got to go to Lansing, whatever, to get the...
Very much.
Just to go back. So 10 million in revenue, is that if the average house is 100 and let's say it's 100 grand. So that's 100 houses. Is that a year?
Our best year that I was there, we did 71 houses.
70. Okay. Got it.
And
And when you say you plateaued, what do you mean by that? So you hit 10 million and then you kind of flatlined.
yeah, we were right in that 8 to 10 million for almost the entire time I was there.
And what was that like for you? What have you been able to kind of diagnose why you plateaued?
Oh
with
yeah,
hindsight being 20.
there are many reasons, and it was such a huge reason of why I got out of the business. So there were several factors. Okay, number one, it is a heavily regulated industry. Okay, nothing works without money. And even though in the end we started to get a lot more cash customers, the overwhelming majority of our buyers got loans. Think of what the mortgage market has done and the restrictions and the rules and the regulations. And, at some point, I forget, it was after the Great Recession, they started coming out with these rules that if anything changes on the loan, you had to wait another, 3 days. And it was silly stuff like, hey, the homeowner's interest rate was quoted at, 4.5 and rates tick down so we can get them 4.25. But now you got to wait an extra 3 days to close and get your money. And it was just miserable stuff like that. It was miserable dealing in different counties. So because we traveled, we had to deal with every local government official. And some of them were very nice. Some of them were knowledgeable. Overwhelming majority were not very knowledgeable. There was a joke when I went to get my contractor's license. I did it in the state of North Carolina. At the time, I think the pass rate was 60%. And so I went to take the preparation class. And the gentleman who's teaching the class, he says, I just want everybody to know, we have a high failure rate. Only 60% of you will be able to pass your test. But don't worry, the other 40% of you will become building inspectors. and he said it jokingly, but we found that to be
There's a modicum of truth there.
Yeah.
So you plateaued in part because of the regulation and the regulatory environment was just becoming more difficult.
It's not just regulation. It was also, we're buying from a factory, right? And what would happen is, say we would sign 10 deals in a month. We'd be like, great, we're going to have a good month. A break-even month was 2.5, 3 houses when I was there. And so the only way you really make more money is you got to compress the number of houses you close and finish in a month. And so we would have this month where we would think, hey, we got 10 houses we're going to close. We're going to have a fabulous month. Well, then all of a sudden the factory goes from getting you houses in a week to, oh, we're 2 months backlog. So then you can't even get them. And there were all these factors. Or we would go to get a permit, in Charleston County, South Carolina, one of the absolute worst counties to build homes in. They have one of the highest attorney per capita ratio. So
that's always a problem.
Yeah, they're very litigious. They're very rule oriented. There are rules for the rules. And so, and please understand, right? The way we get a plan in North and South Carolina is there is a CAD engineer that draws the plan up. He sends it to a third-party engineer that's, certified by the state. They certify that the plan is proper. They then send it to the state, which is purely a rubber stamp, and it's this time factor. They got to put their stamp of approval on it. Then you go to your local county, and somebody like Charleston County, they might take 2 months to approve your plan.
Right. And so you've got more. What was there, do you recall a straw that broke the camel's back, that a day, customer experience, something that triggered you to want to sell?
No, I never liked the business, to be honest with you. I'm a super competitive guy, and I just like to win. I don't really care what that winning is. I'll give you a good example. My wife, who's wonderful and awesome, surprised me for one of my birthdays. I don't remember if it was my 35th or 40, and we went out to Las Vegas. And we would go in and we would put $20 in a machine, and I'd win $5 on the first or second spin. And I'd look at her, I'm like, let's go. She's like, what? I said, we won. And I just like winning. And winning to me is having satisfied customers, doing things right. It wasn't, I like big bank accounts too. That's a form of winning, but it doesn't have to be, right? And what I learned in this business is you're always losing. You're never getting your houses on time. You're never satisfying your customers. You're always fighting with your subcontractors. You're fighting with the factory. You got employee issues like everybody has. And I think I was just always beat down by it. And there wasn't enough winning in it. It was surviving. And so it was one of those death by a million cuts kind of thing.
Man, I'm sure a lot of people hearing this right now can relate, given that we're recording this, during a pandemic and the economic turmoil that is sort of triggered by all that. I'm sure a lot of people sort of feel the same way that you did during those times.
Yeah.
So there was no specific triggering event, but what was the next step? Once you decided that you wanted to sell, did you take it to market? Did you have someone in mind? Did you hire a broker? What was your...
So what happened was, number one, I started the business with a partner. I was incredibly fortunate. I got involved with EO, and EO
Entrepreneurs Organization, yeah,
and really, really helped me. So the first big watershed moment was I realized that the person I had running the company as the general manager was not the right fit. And I was able to hire a gentleman who was so way overqualified for the position. He was at the end of his career. His wife worked for a bank in Texas that at the time got bought out by Wachovia, which converted to Wells Fargo. And she was moving from Texas to Charlotte. And I had a contact in my EO forum group who was in staffing, and they had kind of helped me in this process. And this is where we found my new general manager. His name's Guy Simpler, fabulous human being. He really helped me learn a lot. Very shortly thereafter he joined, I bought my partner out. And,
how did you value the company when you bought your partner out?
He was in need of money, and we kind of haggled. This literally lasted for about 8 hours. He called me. He said, "Hey, I need to get some money." I said, "Hey, I got a better idea. Why don't I just buy you out?" And there really wasn't a traditional business valuation or anything like that. It was more of he needed some money, and I negotiated with him, and that's how we left it. And so that was a watershed moment, because he had interest in so many different things. He was a mortgage broker. He wanted to start another dealership. I didn't want to do that. He did it behind my back. He started a mortgage company. He's the kind of guy, and he's a professional poker player, and he was a super nice guy. He had a great personality. Really liked him. Just our senses of values and how to run the business were just incredibly different. So it just wasn't going to last very long. But he was the kind of guy that if you go to a casino and you see the person playing three hands at the blackjack table, yeah, that's kind of, his personality. And I'm over there. I'm like, well, let's just take care of this, And so we bought him out, and then we just realized we got to the point, I knew I couldn't grow it any further. That business is impossible to grow. Even the gentleman, Mark, who bought the business from me, he had these ideas about possibly growing the business. And I think those have changed over time in the 5 years, almost 5 years that he's owned the business.
How did you, so you go back to hiring your general manager. What was it that you were looking for in a general manager?
Well, it was definitely somebody I can trust above and beyond all things. I wanted somebody who had experience running organizations. I wanted somebody who had real estate experience. Guy's resume was unbelievable. First of all, he worked in the White House. He was a recruiter back in the days, and he'd tell you all kinds of crazy stories of Nixon and Carter and Reagan, and it just really neat. He understood business. He was a consultant for a very long time, and he had his real estate license back in Texas. And so he kind of fit the bill. It's very interesting. So we did a typical search, right? I forget back in the day what the search engine was, but it wasn't Indeed. Indeed didn't exist back then, but it was one of those. And we had a short list of 5 people. His resume was absolutely top of the list. I did a phone interview with him. I had a very, very good friend of mine who's a world-class sales consultant, Mike Weinberg, who I've worked with, went to college with. He interviewed him. We all agreed that he was head and shoulders above everybody else. I was a big believer in personality testing, still am. We did a bunch of personality tests. It was very interesting. We had 5 candidates. Then I had my old general manager who we were going to move into a different role. There were 2 folks, and what they told me about the personality testing, I believe it to be true. It will not guarantee success, but it will guarantee failure. Right? So if somebody,
which personality test did you use?
We used, what was the name of it? Oh boy. It wasn't Myers-Briggs. It was the one based
there's
on.
a Berkman. There's Colby. There's a few. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I'm going to remember it. It's on the tip of my brain here, and I'll remember it. But I'll get back to that. Anyway, we had the 5 candidates, and I had my old general manager do it, and they told me, well, you have 2 people that are absolutely guaranteed to fail. One of the candidates and my current general manager. So it kind of validated, the move. And so Guy was coming to town with his wife to look for houses. And we met on a Saturday. And, we just planned to talk for about an hour. And we literally talked for about 8 hours. And this was in Charlotte at the offices of the staffing company I was using to help me. And he asked me about being open on weekends. And I said, well, we're open Saturdays. We're not open Sundays. And he said, why not? I said, well, we do live in the Bible Belt and we do want to respect church. He said, well, what about opening after, church? I said, yeah, I often thought I really want to do that. But my sales team, which were only 2 people, said it's a waste of time. And really what was going on is they didn't want to work it. It wasn't that it was a waste of time. So he says, well, I'd really love to see your place. Can we go down there tomorrow, which was a Sunday? I said, absolutely. And so once again, we planned, maybe an hour, hour and a half, and we were there for 7 hours. And while we were there and I'm showing him the office and the models and our computer system, and we literally had like 8 customers. And he looked at me and goes, and why aren't you open on Sunday? And I said, yeah, I think it's really more a personnel issue than anything else. He goes, well, we'll fix that. It was great. So he really allowed me to look at the business and have some confidence of somebody to trust, somebody to get, because I was really surrounded by folks that I didn't have a lot of faith in. And I didn't feel comfortable. And, I never want to grind. I always used to call it a house of cards, right? The higher the house of cards gets, more likely it's going to fall. Sure. I said, I don't want to do that. So we reached that certain level. And after a while and surviving the Great Recession, I was just burnt. And here I am. I meet Jay Offerdahl, who has this company, Viking Mergers and Acquisitions, and it became
Jay's an M&A guy. He sells companies. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. He represents sellers.
Okay.
And I guess it was started by his father, and he joined the business. And Jay was in my forum in EO, so every month I got to see him. And great Christian guy. I mean, just really stand up. One of the he's really one of the folks that I really look up to because he always remembers details about you. And he'll ask, hey, how's such and such doing? Or how did this issue go? I mean, it might be a month apart. He is incredibly thoughtful and especially for a guy. I'm that type A,
You don't throw all of us under the bus.
Well, a lot of us are. At least, hey, listen, I'll take the mantle for that. I mean, I'm terrible. I mean,
so what did Jay say about selling your company? What did he think it was worth? What did he like?
Well, that's the thing. Jay's business model. He's like, listen, we do business valuations for free. So he said, let's kind of go through the process. And so I knew my company wasn't big enough, even back then, right? We weren't big enough where I can sell and retire. That wasn't going to happen. But what my plan is I just really need a change, right? And so I want to get out of this. And I'm not a quitter. It's not, essentially, I wound up working there 17 years. So even at this point, it was over a decade. But I just realized I was burnt out on the business. And so my idea was what I need to do is I need to sell the business. I want to take a little bit of time off, and it's going to take a little time. You don't just walk into another business. And you got to have some money to buy another business. And so that was my 3-part plan, right? Sell the business, time off, go into, another business. And so we did a business valuation, and this was like 2011-ish, I think. So we made it through the recession, but the books didn't look great. And Jay kind of counseled me on, all right, this is how we operate in this ballpark, right? You're going to get a multiple of owner's cash flow. It's going to include, your salary, whatever benefits you get, your profits. You could add back some of your amortization, depreciation, interest expense, and let's think about it. Now, one of the best moves I've ever made is when we started the business. We rented the space where we operated, and we had an option to buy it. And I exercised that option the first year because I didn't want to buy it initially because I didn't know if the business would succeed. And so once I realized it was a good business, and mind you, okay, so I came in our small little town. I told you some of these towns have more than one dealership. We were the 8th dealership in town. There were 7 other competitors there with us. Including some manufacturers that had retail outlets. In our first full year, we did more business than the other 7 combined. So I had a lot of confidence that we were going to, last. So I went out and I bought the property. And I'm not a big debt person. And, I figured, well, I can, have cash sitting around at whatever it was back then, 2-3%, or I can pay my note down at 7%. So I just kept paying my note down. And that's something that really carried us through the Great Recession was I owned my property free and clear, but had an equity line on the property. And so when all the banks stopped lending money, they still would lend you money on your property. And that's what I used for my operating cash back in the day. And it turned out to be really valuable.
Okay, so I want to go back to your M&A professional, Jay. And then we'll get into the how the real estate ownership played into the valuation as well. But Jay said that your business is probably worth a multiple. I think brokers and M&A professionals refer to this thing called SDE, seller's discretionary earnings or income, which is basically as you describe it. What kind of multiple did he think you might get on SDE?
Somewhere between 2 and 4 was the guess. Maybe
kind
one
of 2 to 4 times SDE. And did that, I'm assuming he was proposing that you carve out the real estate and own that or sell that as a separate asset. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Got it. And I don't mean to cut you off. Let's keep going in the story. So you have this valuation done. The books aren't looking great. You've just come out of a recession. What did you do next?
Put my nose to the grindstone. I mean, we really just dug back in. I don't know that we did a lot of special things. I mean, I was always trying to improve the business. The one thing that I always had going for me is I'm not really good at anything. So I need good people around me. Some people look at that as a negative. I always looked at it as a positive, right? The business was not relying on me to sell the houses. The business was not relying on me to build the houses. It was just relying on me to keep the finances and keep things going. You know, the big joke, I still use it to this day, is my official title was CEB. And everybody looks and says, CEB. I've heard of CEO. I've heard of CFO. What's CEB? I said, Chief Errand Boy.
Nice.
And that's really the way I looked at myself. I try to be the grease to make everybody else's job go easier. And so I always had that at my company. That was a big asset, especially to sell, right? There was no risk of David walking away that the company would collapse because I did, X, Y, or Z, and nobody else can do X, Y, or Z. The big joke is I signed the checks, right? That was the thing that I, was most important for.
So fast forward us to, you put your nose to the grindstone, and then presumably you then decided to take the business to market. Yes. When the financials were looking better.
We did evaluation back in, it was probably 13, 14, somewhere in that range.
2013. Okay. And what did that come out at? What was your reaction to the number that
very doable. It was very doable. It was, like I said, it wasn't where I was going to retire, but by my calculations, I could probably take a year off and have enough money to buy another business and try something else.
Had the multiple of SDE changed, or was it that your SDE had improved that much?
Yeah, the SDE improved.
I see. Okay. So you're more profitable, but the multiple remains the same. Yep. What was the next step? Did you hire Jay, or what?
Yes.
Where did you go from there?
I hired Jay, and one of the things, so we're in Forum together, so I know a lot about Jay's business, and he knows a lot about my business. And it's incredible of the similarities that the business brokerage has with the modular home world, right?
What way?
There's long sales cycles. You get no cash until the closing. Just a lot of things that, we shared as a forum together. And so I start asking questions somewhat as his client, but even more to know more about his business. I said, Jay, go through tell me about timing, what do you see as typical timing? And what do you know about, in this area, what makes this difficult? What makes this easy? He made a comment to me, and I was shocked at the time, right? Because I'm over here as a seller, right? And he told me, his quote was, buyers are a dime a dozen. He says, I have no issue getting buyers. He says, what I have a problem is finding good businesses to sell. And you have a good business. And I looked at him, I said, so you're going to be able to do this? Because I'm thinking that there's a good chance the company's not going to sell and I'm going to be stuck. He goes, oh no, you don't worry about that. This is easy. And he tells me, he said, once a quarter, I sell a business before the listing even goes up on my website, and we advertise it in different areas. I said, really? He said, yeah. And I was just blown away by that. I thought I was going to have a terrible time. And so what happened was he had some interest. And his thing, he has many agents that work for his company, and they do have a pool of people that are looking to buy a good business. And they'll reach out to that pool of people to give them like a sneak peek of it. And sure enough, he had a guy. Now, one of the complications in this business is you did have to have a general contractor's license, which is not very easy to come by. So either you have to have it, or you have to bring somebody in that has it, or they had to swing a deal with me to stay on, which is not something I wanted to do. And so we had a gentleman who was interested before it even went to market. And I'll never forget this. The guy came, we met at Jay's place, we talked. He came, he did a visit at my sales center. And he started asking me, right before he left, he said, I do have a partner that's going to help me financially, and I got to talk this over with my wife. He just looked at me and he said, but it would make me, really happy if you would agree that you and your wife would go out to dinner with me and my wife if I feel like we can do this. I said, that's a done deal. Just, give me the offer. I'll be there for dinner. And that particular day, my wife came down to meet me for lunch. And we're in the car and we're driving to the restaurant. And Jay calls and I put him on the Bluetooth. So my wife's sitting right next to me and he said, David, you just sold your business.
Oh, hold on a second. Back up. So he had given you an offer?
He had not given me an offer yet.
Okay.
He had just left after he said that about going out to dinner with the wives. And so this is, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes later, my wife shows up and we're going to go out to lunch. And I said, what's going on? He said, he's going to go home, talk to his wife, but he's coming in. And I think this was a Thursday. So I think he said he's coming either Friday or Monday, and he's going to do one last look and he's going to write the offer up. But he said, it sounds like it's a done deal. I was like, great. And so I'm ecstatic. I mean, hasn't gone to market yet. We had this guy. It's awesome. And Friday came by. He didn't show up. Monday came by. He didn't show up. Tuesday or Wednesday came and he said, Jay called me. He said, David, I apologize, but he's backing out. I'm like, okay. Didn't bother me that much because it was, we hadn't even gone to market yet, but it was a little bit of a disappointment. And then we had it on the market for many months. Still wasn't a great time, 14, 15, it was 15 at this point. 15 still wasn't a great time for home building. People really didn't, especially modular home building. There's still some perception out there about, the business and the industry. And Jay held an event at our local baseball stadium. We have a minor league baseball team in Charlotte. And a few years ago, they built a gorgeous brand new stadium in what we call Uptown Charlotte, which is downtown Charlotte. And Jay had an event where he brought in a few of his clients, a few of his past clients, and a bunch of his agents. And there was a gentleman there that Jay was bringing on as an agent. And I met him. We started talking. And I'm a baseball guy. I like baseball. I played baseball growing up. I think I watched maybe 3 or 4 total pitches that whole game. I talked to this guy the entire time. He said, I got a friend of mine that I worked at Driven Brands, which is the parent company for Meineke and Mako. And he was the CIO. He ran the franchise development group, and he ran the in-house store group. So he moved around as an executive, and he was consulting. He said he's actually from England, and he's overseas right now, but he would be perfect for your business. And when he gets back, I'm going to talk to him. And that was Mark Street, and that's who bought my business.
Take it from there. So what was Mark's first reaction to the business? What did he say?
He's incredibly intelligent. He just kept, in a very good way, peppering me with questions about the industry. How does this work? How does that work? What do you do for this? What do you do for that? And he understood the business model immediately. Immediately, he understood it. And he was very excited by it.
And was there a concern in your mind as you're talking to Mark that the more you reveal, the weaker your negotiation position would be?
No, we had it priced so cheaply at that point. So one of the things we didn't discuss is, so we went to market at a certain price, and during that hiatus of really not getting any interest, Jay had asked me to drop the price of the business. It wasn't by a lot, but It was
if I
enough.
ask what you listed it for and what he asked you to?
I probably can't tell you all that because I don't want to divulge Mark's confidentiality.
Maybe just on a percentage
Basis, we probably dropped it, I don't know, 15%.
Okay. So at this point, you're feeling like it's a pretty low price. So you're not worried about telling Mark too much.
And honestly, there was never any negotiation about price. Mark saw the value in it. I knew the value in it. You know, I priced it to sell. I was ready to sell, and he understood that. And I think, you know, the one thing that I look back and was all the difference in the world is the relationship that me and Mark have. He is just a super, super great guy. And I think that we went through the process together and we understood that obviously we have both our selfish needs out of this. But if I did everything possible to look out for the benefit of Mark and he looked out for the benefit of me, that this was going to be a really fun ride and a good deal for both of us. And I think it has been. And I took that attitude. I mean, we had a few things. I guess in every deal, there are just things, you just can't think of every scenario. You just can't. There's so many things that can crop up and come up.
What happened in yours?
I'm trying, they weren't major things. There might have been an expense that we were going to incur. And, you know, Mark and I would look at each other and be like, all right, you want to split it? Okay. I mean, that was literally the length of our negotiations with these little extra things that would come up. And
Got it. And how did he structure his deal? Like, what was it 100% cash at closing, or did he structure it with some financing? What was the structure?
No financing, yes. So several things. So first, and you had two parts to it, right? It was an asset sale of the company assets, which was one company that I owned. And then there was the real estate sale from another company that I owned. And Mark structured it similarly, right? He set up two companies. Mark actually used retirement funds and he used SBA lending. And so I'm not privy to all the extra details he had to go through of using the retirement funds. But it was an SBA note. It was a 10-year note on his part. He might have refinanced by now. We had a conversation. I just don't recall what he told me about it. But typically SBA, you got to come with 25% down, and then you can finance the rest. And so that's basically what he did.
And did you have to finance some of it as well?
No. Well, here's what happened. So very, very difficult business. And it's almost, I basically wrote the offer because I think I was the only one who understood the business well enough to make that happen. So the problem in this business is you have this incredibly long sales cycle. Okay. And there's a time period that it takes to close a deal. Right. And so the way the deal had to be structured was we had to list the clients that we were working on and categorize them. And so there were certain clients that I started and I was going to finish, and they were all going to close before the deal to transfer ownership to Mark was going to happen. So that was category one. There was category two of clients that I was going to start, and then they'll finish probably when Mark takes over, which meant, he'd have to help get those deals done. I might still have paid for some of the bills, and I was going to keep the revenue. Then there were deals that I was going to work on for Mark, and he would reimburse me the expenses, and I was going to turn those over to him. So he would benefit from having revenue when he started. And I guaranteed him a certain revenue in the first, I think it was 2 months. He would guarantee to have these closed. And if something would happen where they didn't close in that time, I would lend him the money until they closed. And that's how we worked it. But it was pretty sophisticated in how we had to isolate each individual deal and decide what would happen. One of the things looking back are there were deals that really should have closed under my jurisdiction that got dragged out for months. Part of why I left the business, right? I just couldn't get things closed fast enough. And in hindsight, I probably should have been more aware, but I was always the optimist in this business. And I was always beat down by it because my optimism very rarely came true.
What commitments did you make, either legally or morally, to Mark to help him with the transition? Did you agree to stay on for a period, or what was that?
Yeah,
like?
so legally, I think it was 30 days I was supposed to be there. And I did. And then I started coming in once a week to pay my bills, right? So I still had my deals that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
He would keep a separate folder, and I would pay my bills, and I would help him with whatever questions he had. And then Mark felt it was better, and he was right, that I stopped showing up at the office. So then Mark and I would meet for breakfast once a week. And we did that for months at a time. And to this day, we don't meet every week. We meet once every few months, but we go have breakfast. And he totally does not need me. He's perfectly capable without me. And so we talk about, we do talk about the business, but we'll talk about other things as well.
It sounds fascinating. I mean, what a story. If you had it to do over again, all the way back to even after the first valuation where you saw the number wasn't what you needed, would you do anything differently? And again, a lot of EO members will be listening to this where they're looking for, tips and tricks, negotiation secrets, things they might sort of moves they might play to make the process more favorable. Is there anything that you might do differently with hindsight being 2020?
So this is really further hindsight. This is actually something that I picked up over the last 6 months. There's another EO member, Greg Crabtree, who's an accountant. I think he's out of Birmingham, but I think he was in the Atlanta chapter of EO. And he's developed what he calls, and he's got a book called Simple Numbers. And I've just adopted that in my new company. And that probably would have been a game changer for me, keeping track of things in Carolina Country Homes. And, from a negotiation standpoint, I think using the simple numbers, I probably would have been able to drive more value because I would have been focused more on some other numbers that would have helped me drive that value. That's the one thing I look back now. What actually transpired with Mark, if you can guarantee, which you can't, to have a personality sitting across the desk like Mark, that would be the number one thing. And maybe that's something people can look at, right? Spend as much time evaluating the personality that you're working with. Now, some people might not care, right? It might be a dollars and cents thing for them. For me, it really made the process fun, enjoyable. This business was my baby. And so I love the fact of talking about it and relaying to somebody who was incredibly bright of my struggles and problems and success stories with it. It really, it allowed me to, I enjoyed the process of selling the business more than I had sold the business itself, right? And I said this comment to Mark. I really did. I said, Mark, I would love to work with you again, just not in that business. and I think that's a key. I mean, I think you can make your process incredibly rewarding and fun, or you can make yourself absolutely miserable. I mean, there's no question in my mind that this could be a miserable process for somebody. I've talked. I have a new EO friend. He just joined EO, and his relationship with the person he bought the business from is not great, and it causes a lot of pain and heartache. And to this day, I have not missed a Christmas party. Mark has invited me to every Christmas party, and I go to every single one, and I love seeing the people. They're like family to me. And I'm very proud of what Mark has done. And he's frankly, I think he's done a better job than I have. And I'm thrilled for him. I'm absolutely thrilled for him.
Well said, indeed. Did you buy yourself a trophy? Any sort of recognition for a job well done? So
one of the biggest things for me is, I'm married 20 years, coming up on 21 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have 3 children. One just turned 20, 20 soon to be 19, and a 17-year-old. And it's my 2 sons are older, and then my daughter's the quote unquote baby. I wanted to spend more time with them. I've always had a really good balance of being home and doing things, but it was always preoccupied time, right? So I'd always, throw a football with the kids, but I had a phone in my ear, talking to a subcontractor or whatever. So I wanted to have some undistracted time. And so my oldest child, he's a big sports fanatic, as am I. And so we made this trip to New York. I'm originally from New York. I don't know if anybody's picked up on that accent yet. I hide it pretty well being in the South, and my wife's from the South. And so we had this incredible weekend where we're big Tar Heel basketball fans, and they were playing up in Barclays. This was probably 16, I think it was. No, 15. Must have been 15. And so they were playing in Barclays. We went to see them. We then went to the Panther Giant game, which is the game where Odell Beckham and Josh Norman were fighting with each other, and the Giants were getting killed and came all the way back, tied it, and the Panthers won. And we're in Panthers jerseys. Even though I'm from New York, I'm not a Giants fan, and I'm wearing my Panthers jersey. And then the biggest coup is we left the Panthers Giant game and went to Madison Square Garden to go watch the Rangers. Wow. And we had a friend. Anybody who knows New York, right? You know how crazy and busy it is and getting in and out. So there's a steakhouse in Madison Square Garden, and we had a friend who did not come to the football game but was going to the hockey game. He went to the steakhouse, got us a table, ordered food. We literally got off the train station, walked upstairs into the restaurant, sat down, ate food, went up a back door into Madison Square Garden, watched the Rangers game. So
sounds like the sports fans' fantasy.
It was awesome. We had a great time. And then my younger son is a big musician, and his class was going down to Orlando, Universal, to play at Universal Studios. And so I was able to go with him and chaperone and spend the time with him. So that was wonderful. And then my daughter also wanted to go back to New York in the spring, and we caught the Mets opening day and a Rangers game. And then we also went to see Wicked and a bunch of one of my friends has a daughter close to her age, and they find these, cool ice cream places to go to or cake shops. And so we had a blast. So we did all that. And then what we had is a huge family trip. And I have one nephew who is 2 years older than my oldest son, but he's almost like the oldest son. He spends a lot of time with us. And so we all got in our minivan, and we drove up to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and spent a few nights and went to the park. And then we went to Albany, New York, is where I went to school. And I have a relative and some friends still there, and we did that. And then we went to Boston, spent a night over in Boston, did some touring. And then we came to this little remote part of Maine. It's about an hour northeast of Portland, and it was on the coast. My wife found this house that is surrounded by water on 2 sides. And next to the house is a lobster restaurant that the gentleman who owns the house also owns the restaurant. And we saw somewhere online that he would let the kids work at the lobster restaurant. This is, mind you, this is back in 2015, I guess, 16. And so, they're 15, 14, and 13. And we spent 2 weeks in Maine, and we just loved it. It is absolutely God's beauty. I mean, we are on these fingers that jet out off the mainland, and there's water everywhere, and it's a big lobster fishing place, which a lot of the local economy is lobster fishermen, and they're some of the hardest working folks you can ever come across. And we just, everybody loved it. My kids are very different. And so we came back the following summer, and we started looking around for property, because my wife and I had this crazy idea, like maybe someday we're going to retire and we want to have a summer place. And my wife looked at me and she said, you don't want to buy a house. I know you want to build a house. And I looked at her, I said, you're right. I do want to do that. And so it was one of these HGTV episodes. I mean, we went in, we looked at 3 properties, we found one, we loved it, we bought it, started coming up with plans. And a very good friend of mine, he actually designed our house in South Carolina. I asked him if he wanted to do it again, and he said, yeah. And so we designed this house where it's a 2-phase build. And last year we completed phase 1, which was basically, it's a garage, which I'm sitting in right now, which is more of a man cave. It's very finished out. This is where my kids sleep. There's a 75-inch TV screen on the wall, and it's great. And then there's an apartment upstairs with a full kitchen, bedroom. We have 2 full baths, and we also have a laundry room and the entranceway.
And I got to ask, is it a modular home?
It is not. It actually is not.
Industry.
Yeah. We thought about it. We actually considered it, but for the design we wanted, and this is a very hilly, rocky part of the country.
Yeah.
And the logistics of being able to get a modular in here, we could barely get the lumber in here.
Yeah.
That is crazy. So we weren't going to be able to get the modular.
So selling this business, it wasn't all that bad, because you bought yourself an oceanfront home in Maine and took all 3 kids on trips of a lifetime. So I think it's just a great story. And I appreciate you sharing it with us. Where can people get in touch if they wanted to reach out to you directly? Do you have a website you want to point people to, or do you accept LinkedIn requests, or what's the best way to say hi?
I am terrible. My 16-year-old daughter likes to tell me how old I am. And I'm really not that old, but I am anti-social media. However, they feel free. Anybody can email me. My email address is david.amigo, A-M-I-G-O. And it's at my new company. It's GANDG landscape.net.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. David, it was great to meet you. Thank you. And congratulations again.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being with you.
Thanks for listening to Built to Sell Radio with John Warrillow. For complete show notes with links to additional resources, visit builttosell.com/blog. John is the founder of the Value Builder System. To find out how to improve the value of your business by 71%, visit valuebuildersystem.com. John is also the author of Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You, and The Automatic Customer, Creating a Subscription Business in Any Industry. Connect with John at facebook.com/built-to-sell or on Twitter at John Warrillow, WARRILLOW. Thanks for listening.